We've been talking about what God's like. Last couple of weeks, we talked about His holiness, we talked about His power, we talked about His love, and we're going to talk about God, our friend, today. A lot of people don't understand that. I don't think you could be friends with Buddha or Allah or any of those other gods of the nations, but the Lord God wants to be your friend. Let's start off in John chapter 15, verse 13. Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you slaves, for the slave does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. Jesus said, I have called you friends. I'm so glad He calls me His friend, aren't you? Now there's a condition there. He says, you are my friends if. Not if people just want to take a blank. You're my friends, great. Don't matter what I do. He says, if you do what I command you. See, if I had a friend and they were constantly doing everything that I hated and making my life miserable and working against everything I tried to do, how good of a friend would that be? Wouldn't be a very good friend, would it? If every time I said yes, they said no, and I said no, they said yes. You know what I mean, those kind of people? It's not really someone you count as a friend. That might be an acquaintance, but not a friend. But God said, you're my friends if you do what I command you. Well, we want to talk about that. What did God tell us to do? And what does it look like to be a friend of God? And I think a really good example would be Abraham. In Isaiah chapter 41, we're going to read verse 8, but we're going to come back to this and finish it later, so you can keep your finger there if you want. Isaiah 41, verse 8, but you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, descendant of Abraham, my friend. Abraham, my friend. God called Abraham His friend. Now this is how many hundred years after Abraham lived? And how many generations afterwards was Abraham their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa? I don't know how many greats there were. But he was still thinking about Abraham as friend. Let's look a little bit about Abraham and his relationship with God back in the book of Genesis. And I'm just going to go through it a little bit. We're not going to read all this because that'd be a lot of chapters. I'm just going to pick out some highlights, okay? If that's all right with you. First we'll start at Genesis chapter 12. The first verse, Genesis 12:1. Now the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, etc. Skip down to verse 4. So Abram went forth as the Lord had spoken to him. So basically God said, I want you to do this. You leave your home. You go out to where I'm showing you. And what did Abraham do? Exactly like Jesus said, he obeyed. What I told you to do, Abraham left. Simple. God said, do it. He did it. Skip over to chapter 13. Now, he took his nephew Lot with him, Abram. And they had a lot of cattle, and their herdsmen started fighting over the land because they didn't have enough land for them to graze. And Abraham didn't like that, and so he said, Lot, look, obviously we have too much. We can't feed our flock on the same ground. So you pick a place and I'll go the other way and there'll be room for us. It's not a family split. It's simply, let's make a room for our stuff. And so Lot looked around and he said, I'll take the best place. That one over there looks really good. Basically, that's what he did. He took the very best looking place and left his old uncle in the desert. But when Lot left, verse 14, the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward, for all the land which you see, I will give it to you and to your descendants forever. So that's quite a promise. Everywhere you see, everywhere you look, I'm giving it to you. So Abraham didn't lose out, did he? So going farther down. So God gave him a lot of possessions, a lot of land, a lot of stuff. But you get to chapter 15. Now Abram has a problem. He's getting kind of frustrated. Look at Genesis 15, start at verse 1. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, Do not fear, Abram. I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great. And Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me, since I'm childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, Since there was given me no offspring to me, one born in my house is my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, This man will not be your heir, but one who shall come forth from your own body, he shall be your heir. And he took him outside and said, Now look toward the heavens, and count the stars, if you're able to count them. And he said to him, So shall your descendants be. Then he believed in the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. Abraham received a very big promise right here. See all the stars, Abraham? You can't count them, can you? You're going to have that many kids. Abraham had no kids at that time. He was getting frustrated. You know, as a friend, you can tell your friends when you're frustrated, can't you? Look, things aren't going the way I want, you know. And he told God. He didn't put on airs, O thou almighty God, why hast thou not? He just told him flat out, look, I'm frustrated here. I don't have any kids. I want kids. And God said, you're going to have kids. You're going to have kids. I promise. But that's not all that happened there. After he told him that, he made a covenant with him. Now, covenant was a very important thing in the Old Testament. It was a promise of giving yourself completely to someone else and them giving themselves completely to you. And they had a whole ceremony. We won't go into all that there, but basically the end result was this. If I made a covenant with you, then everything I have belongs to you. So you could come to me and say, hey, I want that chair over there. I give it to you because what I have is yours. But on the same hand, I could come to you and say, hey, I want your car. And you'd say, okay, everything I have is yours, but everything you have is mine. So basically, you've just joined two beings into one. At that time, they took on a new name, Abraham. God gave him a new name, Abraham. And God took on the name, the God of Abraham. Not just God anymore, the God of Abraham. Covenant. This is important. We're going to come back and see why that's important later. Let's look on in Genesis 17, what happened next. Now they got this covenant. And now they get up to the point of Abraham being 99 years old. That's pretty old to not have any kids. Now, there'd been a problem in the meantime. Abraham's wife, Sarah, said, okay, God said you have kids. I can't have any, obviously. She was in her 80s by then. Hadn't had any yet. Didn't think she'd have any. So she said, okay, tell you what, you take my maidservant and you go into her and you have a son. And their tradition was if, the mistress would have the child born on her legs when she gave birth, she was there, then she could say, that's my child. And then she could give it to her husband and say, there, I've given you a child. Although, of course, it came from the maidservant. So, yeah, that's what they did. Abraham listened to his wife, and he went into Hagar, Sarah's servant, and Sarah became pregnant, and she had a son named Ishmael. There was only one problem with that. It wasn't what God said. Now, Abraham had a promise from God, but he tried to fulfill it his own way. Sometimes we get impatient when God says something to us, and we think we got to make this thing happen. Obviously, I don't see anything happening, God. And obviously, if you said something, it's got to be happening. I better do something right now. And don't take time to listen to God. Wait on God. We can make mistakes. So Abraham made a mistake. And so God reminded him again of that covenant. You're going to have a child, etc. And I'm changing your name. He said to Abraham, then you're no longer Abram, you're Abraham. And Sarai is no longer Sarai, she's Sarah. And I'll bless you, and she'll have a son, and all this stuff. And Abraham, in verse 17 of chapter 12, he laughed. fact, it says Abraham fell on his face and laughed. He thought that was quite funny. He's 99 after all. And said, will a child be born to a man 100 years old? And will Sarah, who's 90 years old, bear a child? And so Abraham thought of a compromise. He thought, well, I'll make God happy another way. So he said, Abraham said to God, verse 18, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. See, trying to find another way to do what God said. But God wasn't happy with that. But God said, verse 19, no, but Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I've heard you. Behold, I'll bless him, and I'll make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He'll be the father of 12 princes, and I'll make him a great nation. But my covenant I'll establish with Isaac. So what was God doing here? Basically, he heard Abraham's concern. Yeah, Abraham did have the son Ishmael. He did it. He made that mistake. God was there to help him anyway. He said, okay, I'm going to take care of Ishmael, but it's not what I told you. You're going to do things my way. And my way is your wife, Sarah, will give birth to a son. I'm not rejecting Ishmael. I'll make him a father of 12 princes. I'll take care of Ishmael, no problem. But you're going to do it my way. Okay, friends. Then they went on. In Genesis 18, God came back and told them, hey, just a reminder, next year at this time you will have a son. He said it, and this time Sarah laughed. She said, well, I have a son. 90 years old, right. But God said, Genesis 18:14, is anything too difficult for the Lord? At the appointed time I'll return to you, and at this time next year Sarah shall have a son. Promise God now. God's getting concrete. I'm telling you, when you're having a son, it's next year at this time. So they got 12 months, yeah. And God's pinned down. He said, it's happening right then. Okay, now things are getting more concrete. But something happened in between. Actually, two things happened in between. One, Sodom and Gomorrah. We know about them. Pretty bad. Needed judgment. We talked about why God judged them before. Because the outcry of people was very great. Because God had to bring justice to those who were suffering, yeah. But Abraham bargained with God. Most people would be afraid to try a thing like that. They'd say, oh, I can't ask God for any favors. But nah, he went at him just like he was trading, making a deal. He said, okay, God, just suppose there's 50 righteous people in Sodom. Won't you spare them? God said, if there's 50 there, I'll spare them. And then he started going down, well, what if it's 45? Well, what if it's 40? Well, what if it's 35? You know, he just started going down. And every time God said, I'll spare them if I can find that many righteous people. And Abraham went all the way down to 10. God, if there's 10 righteous people in Sodom, will you spare it? And he said, for 10, I'll spare it. But guess what? There wasn't. One righteous man, Lot. Not even 10 righteous people in those whole cities. Couldn't be spared. But see, that's something you can do with a friend. I mean, it's kind of like this. This is a bad comparison, but say your boss says, we are doing this. In a lot of positions, you don't have a right to start bargaining with the boss, can you? The boss says you're doing this, you're doing it, aren't you? In most cases. Most people would be afraid to do that with God, but Abraham was his friend. So he wasn't looking at God like the big boss. He was looking at him as, hey, I can talk to God. I can ask God for things. And God listens to me. And God did listen to him. But in the end, it wasn't enough. And then another thing happened. It was, we won't judge them because their culture was different. But in chapter 20, Abraham's still wandering around like he was told to, sojourning here and there. And then this king named Abimelech saw his wife Sarah, and she was really pretty. 90 years old. Can you imagine that pretty at 90 years old that she took this king's eye? And he said, mine. And so he took her in to make her a concubine. Yeah, well, but this is what God, Abraham's friend, did for him. Genesis 20. Look it up, verse 3. But God came to Abimelech in a dream in the night and said to him, Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she's married. So, and Abimelech said, oh, Lord, will you slay a nation even though I'm blameless? Didn't he tell me he's a sister? And see, this was the thing. Sarah was Abraham's half-sister. And so, because he was afraid people would kill him for her beauty, he'd tell her, just tell people I'm your brother. And so he did that. But twice she was taken by kings because of that, because she was a beautiful, I guess, exceedingly beautiful woman. And here it was again, 90 years old. It was almost time for God's promise to be fulfilled. But God made sure that promise could be fulfilled. And no question if that child, Isaac, was a son of Abimelech or a son of Abraham, because when Abimelech took Sarah, God immediately closed the wombs of all the women of his household. Not one woman could get pregnant. Nobody could get pregnant. Over. And he did not allow Abimelech to touch her. God made sure that Sarah was capable of doing what he told her he was going to do, because he was watching over his word to perform it, just like he said. So this thing worked out. She got to come back to Abraham, and now it's time. Genesis 21. Sarah conceived and bore a son, 90 years old, as God had said. But it says in 21 verse 1, the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. See, the Lord did it. Obviously, a 100-year-old man, a 90-year-old woman, the chances of them having kids are pretty bad. God did it. Suddenly, they were both capable of that. That was the hand of God. One more thing we look at in this friend of God. Actually two things. Chapter 22. Here is a big thing. After Abraham had Isaac, his son Isaac. And interesting, God said, name him Isaac. You know what Isaac means? Laughter. Why laughter? Because rejoice. I did exactly what I told you I'm going to do. So every time you look at this kid and you call him laughter, you laugh inside and think, oh, look how God overcame the circumstances. But in chapter 22, God tested Abraham. Remember we talked about that covenant? The promise they made, all I have is yours, all you have is mine. God said, Abraham, take your son, your only son whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him as a burnt offering. In other words, sacrifice your son Isaac. Most people would say, what? No way. I waited 100 years for this kid. I'm not giving him up. But Abraham got up immediately the next morning. He took the wood, he took the fire, he took everything he needed, the knife, and obeyed. Again, Jesus said, you're my friend if you do what I command you, right? Abraham did what God told him. He went there. And why did he do it? Hebrews gives us a hint. Because Abraham believed God was able to raise Isaac up from the dead. In the back of his mind, he's thinking, okay, God's asking for my son, but he already told me he's going to give me descendants through this boy. That means after he dies, God's going to bring him back. Abraham just blindly trusted God. He took him there. He laid him on the altar. And right when he was ready, he raised his knife to kill his only son. God stopped him. God doesn't like human sacrifice. He never, ever wanted human sacrifice. What he wanted here was to test Abraham's willingness to give his son. Now, this was really, really important because Abraham, the friend of God, gave his only son. Now, Abraham's descendants had a right to ask God for his only son. And we did, didn't we? As people cried out to God, save us. God had the legal right to send Jesus. Except nobody stopped Jesus from dying. He went through it all the suffering. He died. He was buried, and he rose again and delivered us from our sin. One more thing I like here about the life of Abraham. Look at one verse out of chapter 25. verse 8. He's 175 years old. Verse 8, and Abraham breathed his last and died in a ripe old age, an old man and satisfied with life. And he was gathered to his people. Old man, satisfied with life. I think friendship with God worked out for him, didn't it? It certainly did. Now, we're going to go back to Isaiah 41. I want to look at the rest of that. Now we know a little bit about God's and Abraham's story. Let's see what he says to Abraham's descendants. Isaiah 41, 8 to 10. Yeah. I'll read it again. But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, descendant of Abraham, my friend, you whom I've taken from the ends of the earth and called from its remotest parts, and said to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you and not rejected you. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not anxiously look about you, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Surely I will help you. Surely I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Do not fear, I'm with you. There's so many good things in there. One, I've chosen you. I haven't rejected you. I've chosen you. Wow. Have God say, I've chosen you. You're not rejected, so don't be afraid. Don't be anxious. What am I going to do? I'm going to give you strength. I'm going to help you. I'm going to uphold you. I looked in the translation to see, is there a better way of saying that? And basically, I'm going to hold you up. Exactly what it says. I'm going to hold you up. I know when we were younger and we did things together, and sometimes situations were not so great. It always felt good to have my husband standing behind me because he was a big man and a strong man. And if something was going on, he was going to make sure nothing happened to me. I knew that. In fact, anybody dare to try to do anything, say anything, it was not a good idea. He was protective because he was my husband, because he loved me, because he chose me. God is so much more loving than that. Ready right there to hold you up. Nobody's getting at you when God holds you up. So let's look at a couple things, how God personally cares for us. Look in Psalm 55. I think these are really good because sometimes we have a misunderstanding of what God is like with people. I particularly like this passage in Psalm 55, starting at verse 16. As for me, I shall call upon God, and the Lord will save me. Evening and morning and at noon I will complain and murmur, and he will hear my voice. He will redeem my soul in peace from the battle which is against me. For they are many who strive with me. God will hear and answer them. Evening, morning, and noon I will complain and murmur, and he'll hear my voice. Some people say, yeah, God doesn't hear anything. If you're talking unbelief and you're talking, negative stuff, you don't listen. Yes, he does. Absolutely he does. He might ask you to change, but he's absolutely listening. We need to understand he's that kind of a friend. We don't have to put on airs with him. You don't have to clean yourself up to come in God's presence. Let him clean you up. God, it's hard. I don't like it. I'm having a hard time. Tell him that stuff. I'm having a hard time, God. I don't know what to do. I'm frustrated. It's better you tell him than to lash out at somebody else, isn't it? Better to say, God, I can't handle this anymore. Help me out. And then he gives you peace and you go deal with what you got to deal with. So much better to tell God about it. In Psalm 56, there's another good one. Start at verse 8. You have taken account of my wanderings. Put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in thy book? Then my enemies will turn back in the day when I call. This I know, that God is for me. In God whose word I praise, in the Lord whose word I praise, in God I put my trust. I shall not be afraid. What can man do to me? Can't you see that? You take an account of my wanderings. You put my tears in your bottle. God holding up a bottle under those tears. You're going through hard times. Writing them down in the book. Yep, she cried the other day. It was hard for her. I'm going to help her out. Man, he had a hard time the other day. I caught those tears, even though you were alone. Nobody else saw them, but God did. God saw your frustration. He saw your tears. He saw your pain. And he took it seriously. This is the thing to know. He takes it seriously when you're going through a hard time. It's not like he doesn't care. He wants to help us out these times. And this is a great one for us to say, this I know, that God is for me. He's absolutely for you. When nobody else is for you, God is. You know, if God is for me, as Romans 8 says, who can be against me? What does it matter if they are? God's on my side. Psalm 3 is another one. Friendship with God. This is a real friend, isn't it? Psalm 3, start with verse 3. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, and the one who lifts my head. I was crying to the Lord with my voice, and he answered me from his holy mountain. I lay down and slept. I awoke, for the Lord sustains me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who set themselves against me round about. I cried to the Lord, and he answered, and I lay down and slept. You know, when things are bugging you so much and you can't even rest at night, this confidence, God's on my side, and he's taking care of it. Don't matter who's against me. Don't matter what the economy's doing or what the boss is doing or what anybody's doing. He's taking care of me. I won't be afraid of 10,000s of people. So what if people saying things they shouldn't say? God's for me. God's for me. It's enough. It's simply enough. Psalm 94. One verse here. Psalm 94, verse 14. Here's one. For the Lord will not abandon his people, nor will he forsake his inheritance. He will not abandon his people. I mean, that's worth reading a couple times. For the Lord will not abandon his people. Never, ever abandon you. Not me, you. On our side, right there beside us, right there. I think that's why you hear so many testimonies of people, even when the persecutions were heavy in the past. And how many of the Christians went singing to the lion's den or wherever they were going to die, because God didn't abandon them right there when they were in the biggest trouble of their life. He gave them that joy. It's okay. I'm going to see God soon. I'm going to Father. He's not leaving me alone. It's going to be okay. And we're not going through that today, but whenever pressures or things come against us, no, he's there. He's there. I want to take a couple minutes and look at Psalm 139. This one really shows how much God cares about you. It's kind of written to show how God is your friend. Let's start at the beginning. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You understand my thought from afar. You scrutinize my path and my lying down, and are intimately acquainted with all my ways. Even before there's a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all. You've enclosed me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too high. I can't attain to it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you're there. If I take the wings of the dawn, if I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there, your hand will lead me, and your right hand will lay hold of me. If I say, surely the darkness will overwhelm me, and the light around me will be night, even the darkness is not dark to you, and the night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are alike to thee. Isn't that somebody who knows you carefully? He knows He says, understanding your thoughts from far away, scrutinizing your past. I mean, he's reading your mind, people. He knows your emotions. Even before you say anything, he knows it. That's why he can say sometimes, wait, don't say that. He knows what you're going to say. And he sometimes gives you a little help there to say, oop, hold back on that one. You're probably not smart if you say that right now. Understanding every word before it comes out of your mouth. He's surrounding you all around, behind, before, everywhere you go. And I like that when he says, no matter where you go to heaven, there he is. You go to hell, he's there. When I was a missionary, I particularly liked this one. If I take the wings of the dawn and dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand will lay hold of me. Sometimes it felt like I was in the remotest part of the sea, even though I was in Europe. But to me, Europe was far enough. For a girl from Ohio, Europe was far enough. But right there, and I held on to that. Even there, your hand's going to lead me, and your hand will lay hold of me, and he sure did. He didn't leave me alone, not one day. For the times when you feel like you're overwhelmed with darkness, when anxiety, when fear, when depression, all those things try to overwhelm you. He said, I'm right there. If you're saying the darkness will overwhelm me, he says, oh no, look at me, I'm light. Remember we said God is light and him's no darkness at all? So anywhere we let God in, there'll be light. That's why it's so important when you're in trouble, you're having a hard time, don't run from God. That's the time you run straight to him. God, it's really hard right now. I'm really miserable right now, feeling down, feeling overwhelmed. God. He says, okay, now I'm going to shine light on that. I'm going to fix that for you. Right there. There's no darkness where I'm at. You're my kid. I'm taking you out of that. We got to trust him. I guess the main thing is we just got to learn to trust him, not try to hide from him, not try to pretty things up or whatever. Just tell God. Let him know, hey, God, it's hard. I don't know what to do. God, help me. He says, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I'm right there. I'm right there. My kid. That's my son, by the way. That's my daughter. That's what God says about us. He looks at us like a proud father. My kid. I'm not leaving him alone. Would you leave your kid alone? I wouldn't. God's better than I am. I remember years ago, I was in Austria, and I just been engaged, but my husband was an Austrian, and I was going to have to stay in the country. I knew if I married this man, I don't know if I'll ever go back to America. Didn't. I had to be willing to stay. But I knew in my heart it was the right thing to do. So one evening, I was standing on the porch of this mission we stayed in. I remember looking up at the stars and just talking to God by myself and saying, God, what's it like to be married anyways? And I really felt like him telling me, it's like this, your relationship with me. You know how that works? Sometimes I ask you to do things, you don't really want to do it, you do it anyways because you love me. Isn't that so? Sometimes you need something from me, you really need my help, I'm right there. I help you too. Give and take. Sharing things. You do it because you love me. I do things because I love you. There you go. I thought about that. I thought, wow, I never forgot that. Yeah. God explaining that to me. I heard it so clearly in my heart. This is what it's like. Loving somebody. He was my friend. He knew me better than anybody else. He knew what I needed to hear. It was scary, honestly, to think of marrying into another culture. I'm going to have to speak German the rest of my life. Maybe. And besides, they were Catholics and I was Protestant. But they were born again. It was a charismatic Catholic church still. There were a lot of things different than what I grew up with or what I was used to. But I knew in my heart it was what God wanted me to do. Because I sure prayed a lot. And God took care of it. And he made a home for me there. And he taught me day by day. My friend. the one I could count on. When no one else understood me, when there were times in another culture, speaking another language. You know, when you learn another language, you have to be willing to make a fool of yourself. Because you're going to make a fool of yourself if you want to or not. You're not always going to say the right words. You're not going to pronounce them properly. You might make grammar mistakes, probably will. German grammar is a bit complicated, and it's more than ours. And how many times I was frustrated trying to tell somebody something that happened, and they would interrupt and say, oh, you should have said this word, or you should have said it that way. And people meant well. They thought they'd help me, but no, what they did was they kind of let the air out of my bubble, you know. Because who wants to share anything if somebody's correcting you in the middle of it? I'm thinking, well, shoot, that was important to me, but now I got to think about grammar to tell you. All right, then. But at times like that, I could say, Father God, you understand English. So let me tell you, this is what that was all about. God always heard. He always understood, and he was there to comfort me. And with time, my German improved. But it took a while, and through all that, my friend was there. Proverbs 18. 2 more we're going to look at from Proverbs. Verse 24. A man of many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. He's not saying that it's not good to have a lot of friends, but not everybody who says they're your friend is your friend. We all know that, don't we? Life teaches you that one. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. That's our Lord Jesus. Always there. Always understanding you. Always looking out for you. The friend closer than a brother. In one chapter back, Proverbs 17, verse 17. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. No matter what you're going through, our friend, Jesus, is right there. Right there. The comfort, help. Do whatever you need. No matter how hard it is, it's going to be there. Tell him about it. Tell him what's going on, and put it in his hands. And then if he tells you to do something, just like Abraham, just obey. It'll be all right. It'll be all right. We thank you, Father, that you are a friend, closer than a brother, there no matter what's going on, understanding our thoughts from afar, understanding how we think, how we feel, everything about us. God, thank you. Thank you for that friendship. Lord, I pray you'd help us to draw closer to you, that we would learn to rely on you more, Father, and not be so proud that we think we have to do things on our own. Dear God, if we do those things, I ask you to show us so we can repent quickly and let you help where you want to. Thank you, Lord. Teach us to be your friends. Thank you, Lord.